Would you still take a bite if you found out someone spat in your food? Now imagine being a billionaire CEO, ordering the finest steak in the city, only to have a black waitress slip you a secret note that says exactly that. 4 words that stopped him cold. That's how it began one stormy night in downtown Chicago, in a restaurant where chandeliers sparkled, glasses clinked, and fortunes were toasted as casually as the pouring of wine. Gregory Hale, a man whose very name moved Wall Street, walked in expecting luxury, precision, and respect. He was a billionaire after all, a CEO whose deals were written about in the Financial Times and dissected on CNN. He didn't expect drama. He didn't expect betrayal. And he certainly didn't expect a waitress, black, young, and far too invisible in the eyes of many customers, to risk her job, her safety, and her future just to slip him a note that would turn his entire evening upside down. Gregory's arrival was as smooth as always. His tailored navy suit fit like armor. His Rolex caught the light as he adjusted his cuff, and his sharp eyes scanned the menu, though he already knew what he wanted. The steakhouse staff had served him before, but tonight the energy felt different. Whispers followed him from table to table. Respect, or was it resentment? Across the floor, Aaliyah carried a tray heavy with wine glasses. Her back straight, her smile professional, but inside she carried the weight of survival. She had been a waitress at this steakhouse for 3 years. Long enough to know who got treated with warmth and who got ignored. Long enough to know when cruelty lurked in the shadows of the kitchen. Long enough to know that if she didn't speak up tonight, she would betray everything she believed about dignity and justice. Gregory placed his order. Ribeye steak, medium rare, no sauce, no garnish. To him it was routine. To Aaliyah, it was a test of courage she didn't even know she was about to take. When she walked back into the kitchen, she caught sight of the cooks hunched over his plate. At first she thought nothing of it, just another steak coming off the grill. But then she heard it. The laughter, the crude whispers, and then the sound that made her blood run cold. Spit hitting the food. Her stomach turned. Her fists clenched. She wanted to shout, to throw the plate away, to demand respect for her customer, even if he was a man of wealth and power who would never know her name. But she froze. This wasn't the first time she'd seen cruelty like this. Usually staff laughed it off, sometimes at the expense of difficult customers. But this wasn't funny. This wasn't harmless. This was foul, dangerous, and humiliating. Aaliyah's mind raced. If she spoke out, she could lose her job. If she stayed silent, she would lose something far greater, her integrity. Her children's faces flashed in her mind, their wide eyes looking up at her when she told them to always do the right thing. No matter how hard, she couldn't betray them. She wiped her sweaty palms on her apron, straightened her shoulders, and carried the plate out. As she set it down before Gregory, her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. She smiled the way she always did, hiding the storm raging inside her. But tucked beneath the edge of the porcelain plate, she slid a folded napkin. On it were 4 words written in neat, careful handwriting. They spit in your food. Gregory picked up his knife and fork, but as he adjusted the plate, he noticed the napkin. His eyes narrowed. He unfolded it, and the words hit him like a punch to the gut. His face froze. For a man who had commanded boardrooms and outsmarted competitors, nothing in his life had prepared him for a message this raw, this personal. He looked up. His eyes found Aaliyah across the room. Her head bowed as she poured water for another table, pretending as though nothing had happened. But her hand shook slightly, and Gregory could see it. This wasn't a prank. This was real. He pushed the plate aside. The steakhouse buzz faded into a low hum as his mind reeled. What kind of place was this that such an act could happen in plain sight, and what kind of waitress would risk everything just to warn him? He motioned for her to return. She hesitated. She knew this was it, the moment that could end her career. But she walked over anyway. Her chin lifted just enough to remind herself she was not a coward. Gregory held the napkin between 2 fingers. His voice was low, controlled, but his eyes burned. Is this true? Her throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to lie, to laugh it off, to say it was a mistake. But instead she nodded. Yes, sir. I thought you should know. And in that instant, just 1 table, 1 plate, 1 note. The worlds of a billionaire and a black waitress collided in a way neither of them would ever forget. The restaurant air suddenly felt heavier, as if the glittering chandeliers themselves had dimmed. Gregory Hale was not a man easily rattled, but now his jaw tightened, and his hand lingered over the napkin like it carried the weight of an entire court case. He had eaten in Michelin-starred restaurants across the globe, flown private chefs across oceans, and spent fortunes on meals that vanished in minutes. Never, not once, had he been faced with this. For a split second, anger flared. Anger at the cooks who dared defile his plate. Anger at the management who allowed it. But more than that, a piercing curiosity sparked in his mind about the woman who had slipped him the warning. She could have kept silent, avoided risk, and let him eat without ever knowing. But she hadn't. Why? Aliyah stood by the service station, clutching an order pad, her eyes fixed on the floor. She could feel the weight of his stare even from across the room. Her heart thudded so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She wasn't afraid of him, not really. She was afraid of what would come next. Her manager could fire her. The cooks could retaliate. Or worse, her children's stability could shatter because of one decision she made in a heartbeat. Gregory signaled again. She approached, her footsteps measured, her posture steady though her insides twisted in knots. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice level but firm. "Aliyah, sir. You understand what you've just done?" "Yes, sir." Her voice didn't shake, though her palms still burned with sweat. But it was the right thing to do. The silence between them stretched, long enough for nearby tables to sense the tension. A couple paused mid-conversation, forks hovering over their plates, curiosity flickering in their eyes. But Gregory didn't care about the eyes around him. His focus was on the woman who had chosen honesty over safety. He studied her face, searching for fear, for calculation, for any sign of exaggeration. But what he saw instead was raw truth. The kind of truth money couldn't buy. The kind of truth most men in his position rarely encountered. "I can't eat this," he muttered finally, pushing the plate farther away. "And I can't just let this go." Aliyah swallowed hard. "I understand, sir. I just didn't want you to not know." Her words pierced him in a way he didn't expect. He had built his empire on contracts, clauses, and bottom lines. But here was a woman, working for minimum wage, telling him something no one else dared say. The truth, even when it could destroy her. Gregory leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. For the first time in years, he didn't know what move to make. Aliyah excused herself quietly and moved on to another table, pretending to refill water glasses, her body buzzing with adrenaline. She didn't know if she had saved herself or signed her own termination slip. But she did know one thing. She had protected her dignity. And no billionaire, no manager, no cook could ever take that from her. Gregory didn't touch the steak again. He sat there staring at the napkin, lost in thought. He had faced hostile takeovers, courtroom battles, and cutthroat negotiations, but never had something so small, a waitress's scrawl, on a napkin felt so monumental. Because beneath the words lay something deeper, a reminder that wealth and status meant nothing if you couldn't trust the very hands that served your food. That night, Gregory Hale realized he wasn't just dealing with a ruined meal. He was facing a mirror held up by someone society tried to silence, and the reflection staring back at him wasn't nearly as untouchable as he had believed. And Aliyah, standing tall, head high despite the storm around her, had no idea that this simple act of courage was about to set off a chain of events that would ripple through both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The billionaire and the waitress had crossed paths by chance. But what happened next would test the meaning of justice, dignity, and the courage to speak up when silence is the safer choice. Because sometimes 4 words on a napkin are enough to shake the powerful to their core. The steak sat untouched on the plate, its sheen glistening under the low golden light. Gregory Hale tapped the folded napkin with one finger, his thoughts moving faster than his heartbeat. Around him, laughter and conversation carried on, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing at table 9. But Gregory was no longer in the mood for idle chatter or fine dining. He was calculating his next move. With deliberate calm, he raised his hand. A waiter rushed over immediately, eager to impress the billionaire. "Yes, Mr. Hale, is everything satisfactory?" Gregory's eyes sharpened like steel. "Get me your manager now." The waiter stiffened. His smile faltered for a split second before he bowed his head and disappeared into the back. The buzz of the restaurant seemed to grow louder as the seconds ticked by. Aliyah, carrying an empty tray, froze when she saw the manager marching toward Gregory's table, his expression tight with concern. "Mr. Hale," the manager said, his voice warm but tinged with nerves. I hope everything is all right. Can I get you another drink? A different cut of steak? Gregory didn't answer at first. Instead, he slowly slid the folded napkin across the table. The manager picked it up, unfolded it, and as he read the 4 words, the color drained from his face. His jaw twitched, his eyes darting quickly toward the kitchen before snapping back to Gregory. This is a misunderstanding, sir. I assure you our staff would never. Gregory cut him off with a single glare. Don't lie to me. His voice was low, but it carried the kind of authority that could silence a boardroom. I don't do business with liars. The manager opened his mouth, but no sound came. He stood there, shifting on his feet, the polished veneer of customer service cracking under the weight of Gregory's gaze. Gregory leaned forward slightly. Bring them out. The cooks who touched this plate now. A hush seemed to ripple through the restaurant. Patrons glanced over, sensing drama unfolding. The manager hesitated, then gave a reluctant nod before vanishing into the back. Minutes later, 3 kitchen staff appeared, young, cocky, trying to mask their unease. Gregory looked them over, his expression unreadable. He tapped the napkin again. Who did it? His words were like a scalpel cutting straight through the silence. The men exchanged nervous glances. One of them, the tallest with tattoos snaking up his arm, shrugged. It's just a joke, man. No harm done. Gregory's eyes darkened. You call this a joke? Do you know how many lives I employ? How many people depend on my judgment, my health, my presence at work every single day? You think spitting in someone's food is a game? The cooks looked down, suddenly less sure of themselves. But Gregory wasn't finished. He turned to the manager. Fire them. All of them. Right now. The manager sputtered, sweat beating at his temples. Mr. Hale, please, if you give us another chance, we can... Gregory slammed his hand against the table, making glasses rattle. His voice rose, sharp and commanding. I said fire them. Do it now, or I promise you this restaurant will not survive the week. I'll own the building before you can blink. The cook's bravado crumbled instantly. One of them muttered, This is ridiculous. But the others stayed silent, their faces pale. The manager, realizing there was no room to negotiate, nodded stiffly. You're finished here. Collect your things and go. The cooks shuffled out, heads bowed, the weight of their arrogance crashing down on them. Gregory watched them leave, his jaw tight, his pulse steady. Justice, at least in this room, had been served. But his gaze drifted across the dining room until it landed on Aaliyah. She stood frozen near the service station, her eyes wide, her hands clenched around her tray. She hadn't moved during the entire confrontation. She couldn't. She knew every word, every glance. Every dismissal had painted a target on her back. Gregory beckoned her over once more. She walked slowly, her breath shallow, bracing herself for what might come. You, Gregory said, his tone softer now but still carrying weight. You saved me from humiliation tonight. More than that, you told me the truth when you didn't have to. Do you know how rare that is? Aaliyah looked him in the eye for the first time that night. I just did what was right, sir. Gregory studied her, his expression unreadable. And what do you think will happen to you because of it? Her lips trembled slightly, but she steadied them. I'll probably lose my job. Maybe worse. The billionaire leaned back, folding his arms. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a calmness that felt almost dangerous, he replied, Not if I have anything to do with it. He motioned for the manager to return. This woman stays. She's the only reason I'll ever step foot in this place again. And if anything happens to her, anything, you'll be answering directly to me. The manager nodded quickly, his face flushed. Of course, Mr. Hale, absolutely. But Gregory wasn't finished. He turned back to Aaliyah. What's your story? You don't belong here. Not in a place like this. Surrounded by people who would rather laugh at cruelty than stand up for what's right. Aaliyah hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But something about his tone, the raw, unexpected humanity in it, made her open up just a little. I'm just trying to make a living, sir. I've got 2 kids at home. I'm in school, trying to finish my degree. This job, it keeps us afloat, that's all. Gregory nodded slowly, his mind already working, calculating. But this time it wasn't about profits or mergers. It was about dignity, about justice. For the first time in a long time, Gregory Hale felt something stir in him that no business deal had ever sparked. Respect for someone who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, yet chose truth anyway. He glanced again at the napkin in his hand. its ink smudged slightly from his touch. 4 words. 4 words that carried more weight than any contract he had ever signed. And though the cooks had been fired, and the immediate crisis had passed, Gregory knew this was only the beginning. Because men like him weren't changed by lawsuits, scandals, or boardroom wars. They were changed by moments like this. By a waitress who dared to slip a note that made him question everything about trust, loyalty, and the invisible battles people like her fought every day. And so, in that restaurant filled with whispers and stares, Gregory Hale made a decision that would alter not only Alia's future but his own. The restaurant slowly returned to its rhythm. Plates clattered, conversations resumed, and the hum of business as usual filled the air. But for Alia, nothing felt normal. Her pulse was still racing, her body still trembling, from the confrontation that had nearly unraveled her world. She expected Gregory Hale to leave without another word, to vanish back into his empire and forget about the waitress who had risked everything for a note. But he didn't leave. Instead, Gregory remained seated, his steak untouched, his glass of wine barely sipped. He was a man who could afford anything, but in that moment, he wanted something money couldn't buy: understanding. He asked for the check not for himself, but for the entire restaurant. When the stunned manager brought it over, Gregory signed without hesitation, his pen gliding across the bill. A collective gasp rippled through the dining room as news spread. He had paid for every single table, but he wasn't finished. He stood, his presence commanding, and addressed the room in a voice that carried effortlessly across the chandeliers and mahogany walls. "This establishment," he said, holding up the folded napkin for all to see, "nearly served me food tainted with hatred. Not incompetence, hatred. But one woman had the courage to stop it. A waitress, a black woman most of you wouldn't notice if she poured your water tonight. She risked her livelihood to tell me the truth. And let me make one thing clear, truth is priceless." The room fell silent. Forks clinked onto plates, glasses lowered, and dozens of eyes turned toward Alia. She felt the heat of their stares, a mix of admiration and discomfort. Her knees wobbled, but she stood tall, her chin lifted. Gregory continued, "Some of you will go home tonight and forget this, but I won't. Because what happened here isn't about one steak or one man's meal. It's about dignity. It's about what happens when those without power speak up against those who abuse it." He paused, letting the words settle. "And I, for one, intend to stand with her." He set the napkin down, his voice dropping back into private conversation as he turned to Alia. "You shouldn't be here another day longer than you choose to be. Come see me tomorrow. My office. Don't worry about how. You'll find me. Tell the front desk Gregory Hale sent for you." Alia's mouth fell open slightly. "Sir, He raised a hand gently. "No arguments. You've proven you're worth more than this place could ever pay you. I'd like to help you find what you truly deserve." And with that, he walked out, his steps steady, his driver already waiting at the curb. The doors closed behind him, but the weight of his presence lingered long after. That night, Alia went home to her modest apartment, her children asleep on the couch under a blanket. She kissed their foreheads, tears brimming in her eyes, and whispered, "Mama did something today, something brave." Sleep eluded her. Fear gnawed at her chest. What if it was all empty talk? What if Gregory Hale forgot by morning, swept up in billion-dollar deals and board meetings? But beneath the fear was something else, a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. The next day, dressed in her best blouse and skirt, clothes she had saved for church, Alia stood outside the gleaming glass tower that bore Gregory Hale's company's name. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside, surrounded by marble floors, crisp suits, and a level of wealth that seemed galaxies away from her daily life. "Name?" the receptionist asked. "Alia," she said softly, almost unsure. "Mr. Hale told me to come." The receptionist's expression flickered with surprise, then softened with recognition. One moment. A quick phone call later, and Alia was escorted to the top floor. When the elevator doors opened, she found Gregory waiting not behind a desk, but standing by the window overlooking the city. He turned, offering a small, genuine smile. "You came?" "Yes, sir." "Good," he said. "Because I have a proposal for you." Alia's breath caught. She braced herself, uncertain of what to expect. Gregory gestured for her to sit. "I can't erase what you've been through. I can't undo years of being overlooked or disrespected. But I can do this. I want to fund the rest of your education. Tuition, childcare, living expenses, all of it. No strings attached. And when you're finished, if you want, I'll have a position waiting for you here, one where your voice matters." Tears welled in Alia's eyes, but she fought to hold them back.
Why me?
Gregory leaned forward, his voice steady. "Because integrity is rare. I've built my empire on people who tell me what I want to hear. But you told me what I needed to hear, even though it could have cost you everything. That's the kind of person I want on my team. That's the kind of person the world needs more of." Her hands trembled as she clasped them together. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he replied simply. Silence hung between them, heavy with emotion. Then finally, Alia nodded. "Yes." For the first time in years, Gregory Hale felt a genuine smile tug at his lips. Not the rehearsed grin for investors, not the calculated charm for media, but something real. And for Alia, it felt like the universe had finally acknowledged her struggle, her resilience, her refusal to stay silent in the face of injustice. Weeks turned into months. The restaurant scandal quietly faded, but Alia's life transformed. She left the steakhouse behind, walked into classrooms with her head high, and studied with a newfound purpose. Her children watched her with awe, learning from her courage without her ever needing to explain it. And Gregory? He too was changed. He began to look differently at the people around him, not just the ones in suits and ties, but the janitors, the assistants, the ones who moved quietly through hallways unseen. He carried that napkin with him, tucked in his desk drawer, a reminder that truth often comes from the voices society tries hardest to silence. Years later, when Alia stood on a stage, degree in hand, her children cheering in the audience, Gregory Hale was there too, not as a savior but as a witness to her triumph. He had given her opportunity, yes, but she had seized it, shaped it, and turned it into something powerful. And as she walked across that stage, her smile radiant, she remembered that night in the steakhouse, the note, the risk, the 4 words that changed everything. They spit in your food. Simple, honest, brave. A billionaire had been stopped cold. But more than that, a black woman's courage had lit a path toward dignity, justice, and a future she could finally claim as her own. And the story of Gregory Hale and Alia was no longer about a ruined meal in a restaurant. It was about the truth that can shake the powerful, the courage that can protect the vulnerable, and the quiet, unstoppable strength of a woman who chose integrity over silence. Because sometimes the smallest acts of bravery rewrite the biggest stories.